Guys, boxing gossip here, coming to you on a Monday night. Do you know what? It's been a good while since we've done a video on Eubank Jr. on this channel, and typically a month doesn't go by without a mention of Eubank Jr. And today I've received a number of messages, so shout out to Damien, shout out to John Joe, shout out to Noel, and I think a few others as well, who've messaged me about Eubank Sr.'s return to Twitter and some of the comments he's made. You may recall about a month or so ago, at the time that Kell Brook versus Golovkin was being made, Eubank Sr. was taking to Twitter and tweeting everyone, including the likes of Simon Cowell and Anton Deck, as to why the Golovkin-Eubank Jr. fight wasn't going to happen. Since that point, he has been absent from the world of social media and seemingly very under the radar in the boxing world in general, up until this week where he's returned. At the same time, we've heard that Frank Warren has won purse bids for Eubank Jr. to defend his British title against Tommy Langford, and it appears that that fight may well progress. So it'll be interesting to see if it does, because presumably that will mean the Eubanks severing their ties with Eddie Hearn and with Sky, and fighting on Box Nation, defending the fight against Tommy Langford. For me, that's not an overly exciting fight. I've never really rated Tommy Langford, and I think Eubank Jr. has already beaten the likes of Spike O'Sullivan, Tom Duran, Nick Blackwell, that sort of level of guys, which is very much the same league as the Tommy Langfords of this world. So it's not a fight for me that offers anything different and is anything that I'm overly keen to see. I don't really see Langford causing Eubank Jr. problems. Having said that, Senior's come back online this week, and the first thing he's done is made a little bit of an issue about Eddie Hearn's comments about the headline pay-per-view fighter owning the show. Now, people have took this in different lights. Some people have taken it that Eubank Jr. is seeing sense. He's realised the error of his ways. And now he understands that he was wrong to believe he owned a show, he owned a security, he owned the ticket prices, etc. My personal take on it was actually the complete opposite. I thought by him coming out saying he didn't realise that he didn't actually own the show, he was being sarcastic, and he was making a point against Eddie Hearn. Now, for those of you who don't know, Eddie Hearn often will take to IFL TV or some form of interview and say, oh, Anthony Joshua owns the show. Anthony Joshua decides who the undercard fighters are. Oh, Anthony Joshua is really smart. He wants the big names on the undercard. I've always bought into that, took that with a bit of a pinch of salt. I never truly thought that was the case. Anthony Joshua is a guy who will be in training smashing a heavy bag for 6 hours a day. I don't really see Eddie Hearn trusting him to sort out the undercard. And for me, that's more Eddie Hearn kissing Joshua's arse and playing up to his ego, as opposed to the reality of the situation. And Eubank Sr. has taken it literally, or is claiming to have taken it literally. And I mean, I can see what he's coming from. If he did own the show, like Hearn has suggested on numerous occasions, then he could set ticket prices however he wanted. He could set security firms however he wanted. So clearly, he doesn't own the show. Clearly, he owns some of the revenue from the show, but as the promoter, Eddie Hearn still has the right to manage the business side of the event, ticket prices, security, etc., etc., commentators, etc. So maybe Eddie Hearn should stop using the phrase owning the show. Maybe that is a bit of an overstatement, and maybe Eubank Sr. is right to make the point that that phrase is the incorrect phrase from Eddie Hearn. But regardless, Eubank Sr. from his tweets, and I'm not going to read out the tweets because there's been a lot of them. If you want to check out the tweets, they're on his official Twitter page, so go and have a look. But he's kind of said something to the effect that he's been speaking to Barry Hearn, and Barry Hearn can see where the misunderstandings come from, and that both him and Eddie have been in the wrong, that he's known Eddie since he was 9, and that Eddie's a great promoter, etc. So the tweets have kind of suggested that there may be some potential for Matchroom and the Eubanks to do business again. And I can see why, because taking Anthony Joshua aside, Eubank Jr. is the biggest name in British boxing probably, and he is the most, maybe Amir Khan, but maybe after Amir Khan and Anthony Joshua, he probably is the most marketable and the guy who would do the highest pay-per-view buys, unless a mega matchup like Fury Hay was made. So I can see Sky wanting back, and maybe what will happen is a similar situation to when Eubank fought Nick Blackwell, whereby he'll go to a rival promoter for one fight and then come back to Sky for a 2 or 3 fight deal. So all of that was raging on, and then today the situation has changed, and Chris Eubank Sr. has exchanged a dozen tweets with Billy Joe Saunders, probably more than a dozen. And it started off where someone tweeted Eubank Sr. that Saunders was a coward. And Eubank Sr. replied and said Saunders was definitely not a coward. And he was actually giving Saunders a lot of praise and saying how Saunders was a fighting man and all of this sort of stuff. And at one point, Billy Joe Saunders actually tweeted back and said thank you or something like that. I don't think he believed the praise that was being lauded upon him. Then Eubank Sr. seemed to change tact and said something to the effect of Billy Joe Saunders has been watching the Olympics with all the running that he's learnt. Or, he was making reference to the fact that Billy Joe Saunders outpointed Chris Eubank Jr. for the early rounds of their fight and then ran and supposedly tried to avoid the heat of the battle for the second half of the fight. I call that boxing skill. Eubank Sr. calls it Olympic standard running. Leave your thoughts on that in the comments section below. But regardless, he then decided to turn it on and get a bit of heated conversation going with Billy Joe Saunders. And the long and the short of it was, it led to multiple tweets back and forth where Billy Joe Saunders was alluding to the fact that a potential rematch could occur, with both Saunders and Eubank Sr. seemingly up for the fight. Now, Saunders did say that he and his team are trying to work out something with Canelo if Canelo was to go out and beat Liam Smith. But if that fight were not to be made, he would be open to the rematch with Eubank Jr. And I guess that makes sense for Billy Joe Saunders. Unless a real super fight comes alive, like the Canelo fight or like a Miguel Cotto fight, the Eubank Jr. fight is probably the biggest money option. To be honest, it's probably actually a bigger money option for Billy Joe Saunders than the Golovkin fight. Saunders was saying he wanted an 80-20 split. You know what Chris Eubank Sr. is like in negotiations, and we do know the commercial value of Chris Eubank Jr. Let's be honest, that's probably never going to happen. But even if it was a 50-50 split, it would probably still represent the biggest payday of Billy Joe Saunders' career. And it's a fight that presumably he would have a very, very strong start of winning, given that he won the first fight. So it's a winnable fight, and it's a fight that represents huge value. And I'd love to see it. For me, that fight with the build-up, with the action in the ring, was one of the most memorable fights of the last couple of years. And isn't it crazy that in hindsight, that was actually an undercard fight? That was an undercard fight on the Tyson Fury Chisora bill. If that fight came round again, it certainly wouldn't be an undercard fight this time around, let's put it that way. It's one of the biggest fights in British boxing. And anyway, Saunders had a bit of a pop. He said he wanted an 80-20 split. He called Eubank out for messing around last time and not making the fight, etc., etc., and alluding to the fact he wanted the fight and then not making it. But the long and the short of it was, Saunders seemed to be amenable to making the rematch. Chris Eubank Sr. seemed to want the rematch, and potentially it looked like the conversations were moving in that direction. Saunders had said previously that he wasn't overly interested in the Eubank Jr. rematch, but obviously there are some frustrations building in the Saunders camp, as was shown by his recent interview with IFL TV. And maybe he's now more open-minded to having another big money negotiation with the Eubanks than he was previously, especially if difficulties are coming with the potential Canelo fight. So, very, very, very interesting situation. For me, I've got to say, whilst I love the hype, whilst I love talking about the hype and discussing the hype, I'll believe that the rematch is on. Not when Frank Warren announces it, but I will believe when the rematch is on, when both guys are in the ring. With the Eubanks outside the ring antics and everything associated with it, it is very, very hard to believe anything that they're going to say at present. And for me, it does look more likely that their next fight will be a slightly more drab affair against Tommy Langford for the British title. But I want your thoughts, people. I've been sceptical of the Eubanks from day dot. What are your thoughts? Will Eubank fight Langford next? Will Eubank re-sign with Eddie Hearn? Will Eubank potentially do something with Box Nation? As I say, Frank's won the purse bids for Langford. If Eubank doesn't take that, he's going to have to vacate his British title. So that will obviously be on Box Nation. Will the Saunders rematch actually happen? You know, I've always thought that rematch is a sensible option for both. It's a winnable fight for both men. Both men will believe they can win it. And it's a very, very high payday. Yeah, the Golovkin fight is a high payday. But let's be honest. They both started huge underdogs in the Golovkin fight. This is a high payday, and it's an even money fight where both guys will think they will win. The Canelo fight, it's an attractive option for Billy Joe Saunders. But will Canelo actually step up to full 160, or will he try and make it a 155 or 156 and make Billy Joe cut all that weight? Will Billy Joe want to do that? You know, that fight is by no means a certainty. You know, with Canelo dropping to 154 and potentially winning a world championship off Liam Smith, you wonder if he'll take another fight in that division, maybe against the likes of Antonio Margarito, who fought and beat his brother recently. So, very, very interesting. I'm not sure what I think. I'm very sceptical of everything involving the Eubanks. But one thing's for sure, I'm enjoying the journey and I'll be covering it every step of the way. Let me know your thoughts. Leave your predictions for the Eubanks and the Saunders next move in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. Many thanks for watching, everyone.